So she heard it open, and my husband and I drove to Louisiana, because he's in St. Mark Village, just like what that was my sister's house over there, and my two sisters and I went there. Karen had, we don't have the sticker yet or the label on it, but, she, so I'm gonna print it, she came there, my sister. But we wanted to the reunion in June, and we were afraid that very much trouble talking about something. No. So we presented, she sent us a little ceremony, how to. But he was quite thrilled, and he was thrilled. And so my brother couldn't come with us, but it's like 4 paragraphs long, so each of us read a paragraph. So really, and I can't believe that I can't believe that I met her.
Yeah.
Therefore, that it was able to get done.
Well, it's like, I know a lady who, they would take US flights that would be retired, and they would cut out the border stars, and then they have a little write-up, and she would just keep little baggies with the star and the write-up in her pocket, or book it all the time. And any veteran she ran into, she would give it to them, because her husband was like the district's submariner, commander, organizer type. So yeah, it's interesting, just the random running into things.
Yeah, I know, it was. Well, I forgot my bare ruler, so is there someplace I'll be able to cut? I'm not sure.
I'm trying.
I can talk, I'll talk to you.
I'm trying to get I've got the wrong camera showing.
I understand now.
All right, good morning, y'all. Wait, let me turn my sound up. I forgot that I had a video on last night. Okay. So, hello. We are doing our block knock technique class of, it's May, right? We're in May. And we have, let's see, Lisa's on our chat. We've got a few more showing up now. If you're here, say hello. Got 1,000 or so people that are coming on to the chat on YouTube as well. We also got 5 or 6 people in our physical class today. So this is how this is going to work. We are going to talk all things half square triangles today. So we will do a quick lecture on some tips on making half square triangles, how to cut them down, different sizes, all that kind of stuff. Anybody that's physically in the class can ask questions. And if you're in the chat, ask questions. I will answer them as fast as I can. So if you have never used your Bloc half square triangle trimmer, that's what today is about. And the project that people are making in the class today looks like this. So this was the kit that they had. I haven't put borders on mine yet, but I will. The kit makes a sort of a throw size, not even really a throw size. It's only like, how big, 45 by 55, I think. We used the Tim Holtz Color Blocks fabric. Everybody got the option of having either a brown background, a blue background, or a teal background. And here's what the quilt looks like when it's all done, only we did it in Tim Holtz fabric. All right, so if you want one of these kits, they're still available on the website. If you're not in class, you can still get these on the website, and we will ship them to you. Some of you are doing your class from home and already have your kits, which is kind of fun. So what we'll do is we will do the lecture. When the lecture is over and the questions are answered, we will end the live stream. We'll get set up for class. We'll turn the live stream back on. So if you just want to kind of hang out in the classroom with us while we're doing class, then you can do that. And you can continue to ask questions during the class as well. Okay? Everybody good? And you guys can come up here if you want to, or you can watch it on your YouTube stream if you want to. That's up to you. All right, so I'm going to move this quilt off the table, and I'm going to turn my camera down to where you can see what I'm doing. As with all my YouTube videos, I'm going to keep talking the whole time so you'll know what's happening, okay? Theoretically, you'll know what's happening. So the things you're going to want to collect, if you're going to do the class with us at home, the things you're going to want to collect is your cutting mat, pen. Ours is, of course, a 5 Little Monkeys friction pen. Your pattern, your 6.5 inch or bigger Bloc triangle trimmer, half square triangle trimmer. I'm also going to show you a couple of other smaller sizes just to kind of show what the point of that is. All right. I'm going to move this off our table. We're going to go hang this on the ironing board. You're also going to want your fabric and iron. Okay. Hey, babe, I'm going to need you to sew some stuff for me. So I'm going to show you even kind of a screwy way to make half square triangles, just to show you that the rulers really do make everything amazing. So our pattern tells us what size to cut our squares. So when we get into class, we're going to cut our squares the size of the pattern we want. You'll see that this fabric is barely even pressed. Like I just chopped it off the bolt. It's got a raw edge on one side. This was even the beginning of the bolt, so it's really kind of hairy and messy. All right. I'm using, so the Color Blocks fabric comes in a small, medium, and large print. I'm using the medium size because that's what's in my sample. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut 2 squares. We're going to cut one of the print fabric and one of the background fabric. I'm not even going to measure mine, and I'm not going to make these squares perfect. Right? I'm going to put my fabric right sides together. We are just making half square triangles here. Okay. You can see that it's, you know, it's kind of pressed, but it's not even a square. I'm going to make a size. It would help if I had my rotary cutter. Hang on. Thank you. All right, I stole Anne's rotary cutter for this. I'm going to cut me some squares. I am going to get rid of my selvage because nobody needs a selvage for anything. I don't know how to use this cutter. There we go. All right, I know what size I'm going to cut these down to. As with all of my other YouTube videos, I'm not giving you measurements, okay? Because, you know, patterns. You can see, though, that this is not even 2 squares. Is this the proper way to do this? No, but is my point to show you that the rulers are going to fix anything you do funky? Yes. Are you okay? Okay. Yeah, we had an accident. Debbie's down. I'll tell you the inside joke to that later. Okay. Have you ever seen Mad About You? Do you remember the show Mad About You? How they had that swoopy part in their floor of their apartment? This building has that. It's right there. Okay. So you can see that our background fabrics are not even the same size. I'm still going to draw my line. Now, if you're going to do proper half square triangles, I have lots of YouTube videos that show you how to do proper half square triangles. You cut 2 squares, you put them right sides together. I also have a YouTube video that shows you how to make 8 at a time half square triangles. And I'm going to put a link in the comments to this to show you the math that you can download from my website for what size to cut all of those. But for the sake of look how screwy you can be, we're going to do it like this. I've matched up, or I've made my right sides together. Pretty sides together is always the rule with quilting, right? I'm going to set this so that there's extra fabric on both sides because my green one, it's not a square. I'm still going to draw a line from one corner to the other. Okay, I like using a friction pen for this just because if it gets somewhere where you can see it, it goes away. All right, so there's my diagonal line. DJ's going to take this over to the sewing machine and he's going to sew a 1/4 inch both sides of the line.
Yeah, no.
You are. Okay, because I forgot to do that this morning. I got stuck and I didn't get done. So he's going to sew both sides of that line, and then he's going to bring it back to me. In the meantime, we're going to talk about some references. If you go to my YouTube or my Facebook, I've got words. If you go to my website, which is 5monkeyquilts.com, you can download from our Notions page. Our Notions link, you can pull down the Notions sheet. At the bottom, there's a link that says Bloc resources. Click on that, and there are a number of PDFs that are listed in the Bloc resources. The one I'm going to want you to print for today, go under the Bloc resources, go to the section that says half square triangles, click on the page that says 2 at a time half square triangles and 8 at a time half square triangles. Print those out. Laminate them if you choose to, but just have them somewhere that's handy. So like Sandra's in the class today, can I show your book? So Sandra, my very nerdy friend, went to my website. She's got her groovy, look, she's got her Bloc notebook. This is her notebook. And in here, she's got references for flying geese, references for Drunkard's Path, diamond in a triangle, strip sets. Then there's some free patterns you can print off the website as well. And she's printed them all out and she's put them in this notebook. So what we're talking about today is half square triangles. So she's got the PDF that says 2 at a time half square triangles right here. Okay. This is the technique I'm going to show you right now. Now, the way that I prefer to make my half square triangles, I'm going to go back to this. This is how you do it. This is what you cut if you want, so you know what size you're going to make. So let's say we're going to make a 5-inch square. This is going to finish at a 4.5 inch in your pattern. Let's say you want to make a 5-inch square. You're going to go onto the website. You're going to print this out. You're going to cut your squares at 5.5. Both of them are going to be cut 5.5. So when you trim it down with your ruler, you're going to trim it to a 5. Your finished pattern piece in your pattern is going to be 4.5 inches. Okay. So if you print out both of these, I print them on 2-sided paper and I laminate it and I hang it on my wall. Now I have the reference for what size I'm going to cut. Now, when I'm cutting anything that's smaller than say I want to have 6-inch blocks. This will show me what size to cut them when they're 8 at a time. Now, this is where it gets kind of weird. If you're going to do a 12-inch square, a 12-inch square, you're going to have to cut a 26-inch square. So that gets a little bit weird. So basically, anytime I'm doing anything that's like 8 by 8 or smaller, because I have a ruler that will cut an 18-inch square, this is how I cut them, okay? You can go on my YouTube channel and you can watch how I do the 8 at a time square triangles. So you get a whole bunch of square triangles all at once. I also love that there is a reference sheet that shows you both right-handed and left-handed trimming. Since half the people in my house are left-handed, I've learned how to do classes for both right and left-handed. So that's a really good reference too. But again, you can print all of this stuff free off my website. The PDFs are fantastic. Jana made all of these images and math for you so that it's really easy to see. Okay, so thank you, Sandra, for bringing your nerdy book. In fact, she emailed me a couple days ago and she's like, hey, did you know that you got the wrong link in that page? I was like, nope. So we fixed it. So it's always nice to have a nerd friend that checks up on you. Okay. So now DJ has sewn both sides of our line here. That's a 1/4 inch either side. Here's another hot take on this. If your 1/4 inch isn't perfect either way, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to show you why. Okay. So again, these are all, so it's probably not hot. I'm going to get you to press this too. So if you lay this down, you can use either your scissors. I like to use a ruler because I get a little hairy and I got little lines. And I'm going to cut right on that friction line that we need, or really close to it. We'll say really close to it. All right. So we cut both of these apart. Now I have 2 half-square triangles. Here's my next hot tip for making half-square triangles. I want to press all mine to the same side of the fabric. Now, if I don't want to think about which way that is to be pressed, I stack them all the same way. So I always walk to my iron knowing which side of my fabric I want to press to. You guys have heard me talk about it before. I have to take away my decision-making choices as much as possible and automate what I do so that I don't get in my own way. So what I do, so let's pretend we made 40 of these. I'm going to stack all of them the same direction with whatever fabric I want to press towards on the top. Because I automate my behavior, I don't have to think about it so much. I just always do the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to press all of mine toward my background fabric. And by me, I mean DJ is going to press these all towards my background fabric. So they're all stacked like that. Now, when you press, you want to press, first you're going to set your seam. You're going to run your iron across the seam the first time. The other thing you want to do when you press is don't push hard on your fabric. You want to just use the weight of your iron to press this down. If you don't have a heavy iron, like say you're using a travel iron or you're using a really cheap like Walmart special and your iron doesn't weigh much, you're gonna have to push on your iron to get a better press. So you're gonna distort your fabric more. If you have a good quality heavy duty iron, I like the reliable irons, you're gonna get a better press. All right, so DJ's gonna press those for me. This class is more about how to cut them. We're gonna talk more about that. Pressing, but those are my hot tips. Set your seam first. And when you set your seam, I want you to do this. I want you to let your half-square triangle down. I want you to run your finger along that seam and feel the thread. Then I want you to run the iron along that seam again, and run your finger along it. And you'll feel that the thread has sunk down into the fibers of your fabric. That's why you set the seam. It makes for less bulk, and it makes your seam more pliable for what you want without the thread getting in the way. So let me show you that one. I always set my seam before I press it and get you an iron that has some weight to it. Because if you have weight to your iron, you're not having to push. Travel irons are great for travel. They're not great for clothing. Now he's pressed my seams. When I feel along this seam, the next thing you're going to want to check for is when you feel along this seam, there shouldn't be any fold over. There shouldn't be any extra fabric in there. You should just be able to feel a nice straight seam. So if you had to press it and it's kind of stretchy, or if you didn't set the seam first, you might end up with your fabric kind of sitting like that, where you have a bit of a fold or a pucker. There's no bueno. Don't do that. You want that to be pressed out flat. Okay. We've pressed them. All of our half-square triangles have been pressed toward our background fabric or our dark side. The good rule of thumb when you're making anything is to press towards the darker fabric option. Sometimes that's not an option. Sometimes you're putting 2 pieces of white fabric together. In that case, just pick a direction that you're going to press them to and make them all the same. Okay?
Just think of Star Wars. You're going to be on the dark side.
Shoulders pressed to the dark side. For this particular class, we're using our 6.5 inch block for triangle trimmer. I always call this the gateway ruler. It's the one that gets you hooked on the process. This is my most common size, commonly used size. That one and this one, believe it or not, I use my 2.5 inch all the time because you'll find when you start making patterns that there's a whole lot that has to go 2.5 inch or 2 inch finished square triangle pattern. Right, now here is the biggest tips. I'm going to want you to remember these two things. Until you get this into your muscle memory, make a note, stick it on your table, whatever you want. 2 rules when you're using a block square triangle trimmer. The logo goes on the low side of the seam. So since we press these all towards our darker fabric, the low side of our seam, and if you're not sure, just feel it. You can feel the ditch, okay? Logo, low side. The reason I want you to remember that get those words stuck in your brain is because when we start doing more advanced things with our square triangle trimmer, that rule is very important. It's important when you're making square triangles too, because if you put it down the other way, it's a rectangle, not a square. Okay, so logo low side is rule number 1. Take this and you're going to push it right into that seam. Okay, so there's my, see how my ruler just grabs that seam? It's going to lock onto that side. So the first rule is logo low side. The next thing you're going to do, and the reason I had you make a kind of a funky square, is because the first thing that you do is you don't measure anything on the first cut. The first cut is all about making this side straight. Okay, so we are simply going to cut off the smallest bit of fabric that we can get off of here on the first cut. We're just going to take these 2 sides off. Okay, so we didn't measure anything. We just trimmed them down. The second rule to a block square trimmer, don't pick it up. You're going to slide it down your seam. So do you see how I just turned the whole thing? If you have a rotating mat, this is a really good time to use it. You can just turn it. But if you don't, you can just slide the whole thing away from you because you don't want to cut towards you if you can help it, right? So I'm going to turn this around the other way so I can cut the 2 sides. Now, if you happen to be able to cut with both hands like DJ can, then you don't have to turn anything. He can cut with both hands. It's very annoying. So the second thing I'm going to do, and the reason I wanted to have a really nice clean cut edge was because I'm going to use that clean cut edge to measure what I'm going to cut in the second cut. All right, so now, since my logo is still on the low side of the seam, I can just slide this up and down the seam. Now, here's something that people don't realize with a block holder. Yes, it grabs onto the seam because that groove, this groove is designed to sit on both sides of your seam. So like if I show this from the other side, it will ride on both sides of your seam. So it's not just pushing that high side, the low side into the piece, it's actually running along both sides of your seam, okay? Now, we're not going to do anything else. We are going to measure this cut. The first cut we didn't measure, the second cut we're going to. So I'm going to cut this down to a 6-inch square. So what I'm going to do is, you know what? I'm going to flip this because it's kind of dark. Can you flip that over for me? That's probably easier to see.
Dark fabric.
Yep. Okay. So I've got my logo on my low side. I'm going to slide this down where I see 6 here and 6 here. Now I'm going to do something else kind of crazy too. I'm going to pretend like I don't know what it feels like yet, how my ruler works. I'm going to get it off. You get to where you just feel when it's right. Okay, so now I'm going to line up my 6 over here. My 6 is right there on my straight line. I do this so much it's almost hard to do it the wrong way. So here my 6 is over here. On this side, my 6 is on the fabric. And the reason for that is because I'm not locked into my groove. So if you find that you're not getting a perfect cut on the second time, push it back into the groove. Okay, now when I slide it down, not only is my 6 on the line, but that line that goes along with my 6 just rides along the edge of my fabric. On this side, my 6 line rides along the edge of the fabric. now when I cut this, I am going to get a perfect half square triangle. Okay. So we're going to cut these two sides. And now what I have is no dog ears. That piece of square that was completely wacky is gone. And I have a perfect 6-inch half square triangle. Okay. My seams go perfectly off the points right here. And that's how you know they're going to be perfect. So now when I go to put these together, here's what I started with. Here's my second one. Here's what I started with. It's messy, it's funky, it's crooked. I've got dog ears. When I go to line these up together, they're not going to match, which is probably what you're getting when you're making half square triangles without trimming them down. And even if you're trimming them down, but you're using a ruler that rocks, you still don't get a perfect half square triangle. Okay? So now here's the next thing I'm going to show you. I'm going to cut this so I can give you some tips on matching your stuff up. So again, logo goes low side, lock that on there. Do my first two cuts, slide it down the seam, another 6-inch half square triangle. Okay, so now I have two perfect half square triangles. Right? They look identical to each other. Now let's say you're going to do something like a pinwheel block or a flying goose block or whatever your pattern is calling for. The reason we always press them to the same way is look how easy it is now for me to make my pinwheel block. Since they are exactly the same size, and since I have pressed them opposite to each other, I can nest these two half square triangles perfectly. Okay, so see how the seam just runs right together like that? I hear a lot of people say that they will decrease bulk. That won't work with these rulers. You can't lock onto the seam if it's pressed open. Two, the reason we don't want to do that, especially when we're doing half square triangles, is that you can't nest the seams like this. And if you've ever tried to nest open seams, and get it perfect like that, it's because you've got bias going both directions. You're not going to get this level of accuracy. Now, here's the other thing about the bulk. You have 3 layers of fabric here. Actually, well, you have 4 layers of fabric here and 4 layers of fabric here. If I press those seams open, I'm still going to have 4 layers of fabric and 4 layers of fabric. Pressing the seams open doesn't make the fabric disappear. It puts it on the opposite sides of it. You still have the same number of layers of fabric. Okay? So now DJ's going to go and he's going to sew this seam right here for me. Okay, and then we're going to talk about some pressing tricks with that. So he's going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on that one. And I'm going to grab my pressing mat so I can show you some tips on pressing. Okay, now I'm using a mat. Yep, putting it right on top of my ironing board because I'm using that silicone pressing sheet underneath it. Okay. Now, obviously, if I was going to press all day long, I would just move my mat. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about with the pressing tips. And I'm going to show you a couple of things about how and why we do it differently. All right. And if anybody in the chat has questions, hold on there. I like questions. Means you're awake. Okay. So we've got our half square triangle sewn together. I'm going to do it over here. Okay. So he's given me my 1/4 inch seam allowance here. Here's what I'm talking about with the setting your seam. When I run my finger along that 1951 ortho thread, so it's a really nice, clean thread. When I run my finger along that, I feel the thread just slightly. when I take my iron and I just sort of press it flat one time, and I run my finger along there, you can barely feel the thread. What that's doing is it's taking the fibers of the thread, sinking them down into the fibers of the fabric. Now, I'm going to set my seam. Then I'm going to pick up the top fabric, and I'm just going to use the weight of my iron to press that seam over. I am not putting any pressure on my iron at all. So the weight of my iron is making that seam nice and flat. Okay. Now, since my half square triangles were perfect to begin with, if you're not getting half square triangle points like that, do yourself a favor, get your block ruler. It will come out like that every time because we trimmed it down to be perfect. Okay. Now, on the other side of my seam here, it's the same thing. We're going to do the same thing when we join these together as pinwheels. We're going to press. What I'm going to do is when I make all of my layers of pinwheels, I'm going to take all of my stuff to the ironing board exactly the same way. When I walk over to my ironing board, this is exactly what my layers are going to look like. I'm going to sew them all in the same direction. I'm going to press them all in the same direction. So when I put these together, these are going to nest right perfectly. As long as you're using a good 1/4 inch seam, these are going to nest perfectly. Then when I join them to each other, it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to have the same level of bulk on this side as I am on this side, and I'm going to be able to sew over that perfectly. On a later video, we will talk about spinning your seams. So if you want to decrease your bulk for your quilting, I'm going to show you how to spin those seams, and that you don't have all of them going to one direction, but that's not on today's class. All right, so this is why we do our half square triangles the way that we do, because they come out perfect every single time. Now, if you're going to cut smaller pieces, let's say you want to have, let's say your pattern calls for a whole bunch of 2-inch finished blocks. Okay, I really like this 2.5 inch trimmer because yes, I can cut my 2-inch blocks off of this ruler. I can just keep sliding down until I get to a 2.5. But do you see what happens? Now my ruler is off my mat and it's a little bit wobbly. If you're using a really big ruler, it gets really wobbly. Yes, you can cut them like that. You can cut all the way down to a 1-inch square, 2-inch ruler, and it's still going to come out perfect every time. But what I do with mine is if I know that my pattern needs 452 2-inch squares, I don't want to do the sliding. I just want to pop it down and trim it on all 4 sides. And then I don't have to think. I just make them all. Okay. Same thing with the teeny tiny ones. Now these rulers come in 1-inch, 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch finished, 8-inch, 9-inch, 12-inch finished. Now, the 12-inch finished ruler is really, really cool. It's not great for when you're cutting these down by themselves though. But in later videos, I'm going to show you how to take things that are already worked, already sewn together, and use that ruler to cut your blocks, your whole blocks, and make all kinds of really neat shapes. Okay, so it just depends on what size finish you want to be. Okay. All right, keep bringing me a quilt that's already finished so we can talk about why you make your pinwheels like that. Just lay it up. So this is a quilt that DJ made for his mom. We just haven't quilted it yet, so she hasn't seen it yet. Look at how perfect his points are in his pinwheels. Okay, and every one of them lays out perfect. All right, now when I fold this over and you look at the back, the way he's pressed them all, yep, there's a big bump there. Now, we're long arm quilters. Once you put batting in there, you're not going to have to worry about that bump. Now, if you want to spin these seams, though, let me show you this magic. So let's say you want to make this a little bit flatter. Grab your seams and you pull them apart like that. So you're going to take one this way and one that way. And now, when I push this flat and I press it, I'm just going to finger press it for now. When I push that flat and press it, not only do you get this super cute pinwheel in there, but now you have less bulk in that center.
Oh, did I not press it right?
Yeah, you pressed it fine. You just didn't spin the seams because it doesn't matter.
Were they nesting?
Yeah, they're all
Okay.
nested perfect.
Okay.
No, they're all nested perfect, but
Right?
for people who quilt on their domestic machine without a long arm, sometimes it's hard to get over a seam that's that thick. Okay, so it's a thick seam right there in the center. But yes, he's nested all of his stuff perfect. He's like, excuse me, I know what I'm doing. And he does know what he's doing. But we also put all of our quilts on an industrial strength long arm machine. So my machine doesn't have any problem going through those lumps. But if you're going to quilt on your domestic or your mid arm, you might want to spin your seams like that. And if anybody in the class wants to feel the difference in the seams, you're welcome to do that. But look at how cute that is. So before you sew your blocks together, you can spin the seams like that and just press them the other way. Okay? So here, you guys want to feel it? Donna's like, I'll do it. So push your finger on that seam and push your finger on that seam. Feel the difference? Right. Now, when I talk about pushing your things to opposite ways, even if I pressed all of these seams open, there wouldn't be any less bulk here as there is now, because the fabric doesn't go away by pressing it open. You still have all the same fabric in the same seam. So if you're worried about thick seams, this is the only thing I would do differently. You also, and you don't have to cut them either. You just pull them apart before you press them. Because if you cut your seam allowance, if you make a little snips in the seam allowance to make it go flatter, now the stability of that seam. Okay, so we don't want to do that. Yeah, look how pretty TJ's quilt is. Isn't that nice? And he put lawn fabric out here in the border, so it's super soft and silky. It feels like he did a good job. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
So, okay, so that is my demo of half triangles. Again, if you don't have a Bloc half triangle trimmer yet, get some. I will say that our biggest seller is the 6.5, the 4.5, and the 2.5, and these do come in a bundle like this. These are the ones that stay open on my table all of the time. Okay? These are my 3 favorite rulers for making half square triangles. Because again, most of the time I want to cut it to whatever size I exactly want it to be. All right. So let me turn the camera again. If you guys have questions in the chat, go ahead and pop them in there. If you guys have questions in the room, I am happy to answer them. Does anybody have a question about anything, or did I explain that right? So has anybody ever argued with a half?
Open seams if it won't lock on and
Right.
will not.
It will. I mean, it will, but it's not going to work like it should, because remember how I said that. So this is a perfect 9/16 etched groove. It's not a 1/4 inch. It's a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch. And the reason it's bigger than a 1/4 inch is because it's supposed to ride both sides of a 1/4 inch seam with a little bit of wiggle room, taking into account your thread pull too. So if you press your seams open, and I know that this is a huge controversy in the world, but like most things that I teach you, I won't just say do it because. I'm going to give you proof as to why. If you're one of our kids, I just say, you can always find out. But that's okay. They're fine. Yeah, if you press your seams open. Okay, so the reason I never press my seams open, I take that back. The only time I press my seams open is when I'm doing a mitered border, because then I can get my miter perfect. And when I do a mitered border, I still take off the fabric and press it down over it again. The analogy that I use for pressing seams is if you've ever built a brick wall, like a cinder block wall, always put rebar in the wall. You can't tell from the outside if there's rebar in the wall, but give it a few minutes and you're going to know if there was rebar on that wall or not. It's coming over. It's going to look real nice when you put it together to begin with, but if you don't put rebar or some sort of structure inside of a wall, it doesn't have the framework to stay up. So the reason that we press our seams to one side is not necessarily for the patchwork part of it. Not only do things nest perfectly when you press to one side, you can get perfect nests, but when I quilt this, when I quilt through all of this, my quilting needle is going to go through multiple layers every time it quilts. It's like the rebar, right? So if I press these open, if I were to open this up, which DJ is such a good presser that I can't even hurt. If I open this up like this, you have a couple things here. One, there's bias. So just in the small amount of handle, you see the flames happening there? If I press this open and then I pull on that, now my stitch length, I usually do 12 stitches per inch. My stitch length is pretty good, but if you look close enough, you can see daylight between those seams, right? So when I quilt through this, I quilting is going to go over air as opposed to going over rebar. All right, so when I stitch through this, I'm sticking that seam in place in my quilting. So my quilting is going to anchor these seams in place. If I press them open, a couple things happen. One, especially if you press them open and then you give the quilt to somebody who doesn't necessarily know how to wash it, they're going to throw that thing in the washing machine. They're going to throw it in the dryer. The dryer is going to make it hot. Heat from the dryer is the thing that kills your quilt. It's not the heat in the water. So even if you do, especially if you have a baked quilt and you got to wash it in hot water sometimes, it's not the hot water in the washing machine. It's the hot water in the dryer. Because the hot water in the dryer is what makes shrinkage happen. So if you I have a knitted sweater that my kids threw in the dryer and it now is a belly shirt because the heat in the dryer made it go. So that happens with cotton too. Cotton will contract in heat because it's a natural fiber. So when you throw this in the washing machine, you throw it in the dryer, it will contract. So if your seams are pressed open like that and your cotton fiber contracts, which way is it going to go? It's going to go this way. It's going to pull the seams. The same way that with a block wall that rebar gets water underneath it, and the water makes erosion, and then the wall goes over. If you have rebar down into the ground, the water's not going to get under it the way that it would otherwise. If you've never built a wall, that analogy is probably. But yeah, so if you have your seams like that and there's nothing anchoring them, and then you throw the washing machine, and we all make our quilts, so quilter, that's different. But if you're making your quilts to be used, they're going to be used, which means they're going to get washed, and you want them to last. All right, so that's my soapbox on seams to one side. There are times when I press mine open, but they're for short periods of time, usually just to get everything to lay exactly where I want it, and then I go back over it. So in my experience, anywhere that I've pressed open, that's where it's coming apart. And I've been quilting for a minute, and my quilts have lived in a house with dogs and cats and kids, and so they get washed a lot. And before I knew better, before someone explained all of the reasons why to me, I was doing that too. And that quilt that we picked under, it is literally in shreds. All those pressed open. But that other quilt that's been on our bed forever, where all the seams are coming back, yeah, it's holding up a whole lot better. So that's my whole thing. Okay. So hopefully I have my case in perfect hasword triangles. You can get all of these rulers on our website, 5rootquilts.com. After this live is over, we are going to take this video down, we'll clean it up, we'll edit it, we'll put it back up again for your reference later. Again, this class that we're doing today, we're going to turn the live off right now. And then when we start the class about 11:15, we'll turn the live back on. It's not going to be like this. It's going to be me teaching class with students in the class. If you have questions, you can pop them in the chat and I will get to them as soon as I can. But you're going to just kind of have a voyeuristic view of our classroom space. So if that appeals to you or you want to hang out with us like that, by all means, pop back on again in a little bit and we will be here. Panoramic view. Yeah. So, all right. So Lisa's the only one that's been talking to me. So hopefully y'all got what you need from this. We will see you guys later. Don't forget, we schedule classes every 2 months. We will have another class in July. I'll put that up on the website soon. That one, I believe, is going to be flying geese. So if your geese fly out of formation, we can fix it. All right? So we'll see you guys soon.